Hello and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast. For those of you who know me well or who have listened to my podcast for a long time now, you know that there's always something new that I'm working on, some new project that I'm trying to get done, or some new direction that I'm planning to take the podcast. And, often I have felt like maybe Simon, you should specify and get very focused on one direction here rather than changing so often. But I don't know about that. I've thought about this for a while, and I think this is kind of the person who I am. What I want to do with all of you is to take you on a journey of my own transformations through this podcast, and I want you to follow along with that transformation as well. And so that means that sometimes there are going to be changes to be made, and that is exactly what we're discussing in this episode today, where I have for you a conversation that I had with the wonderful Sharon Lebell. Now, Sharon and I have been mulling over a few ideas for ways that we could be working together for the past few months now, and this episode is really the first step in that direction, and I'm very, very excited for you all to enjoy this conversation that we had today. It's not all planning, it's not all new announcements and stuff like that. We have other conversations around, aspects of Sharon's life, why we're going to be working together. We do discuss some philosophy, some wisdom, and in general, we just have a good conversation to kick off what it is that we are planning to do, to the extent that we have any sort of full plan in our minds. But anyway, nonetheless, I'm going to keep this introduction pretty short, and I'm just going to let you dive in and listen to our conversation. This is Sharon Lebell and myself. I know that I've been talking a lot in the past year about, should I do a Master of Divinity? Should I not? You'll be glad to know that I'm already 2 weeks into my university course because I applied this week and I'm a little bit late. But they pushed me into it. Well, I pushed myself into it. And so I'm officially a full-time student now of a Master of Divinity. Many thanks to you for kind of guiding me along that path and saying, yep, if that's what you want to do, great. So this is a good place to start. I'm excited. I'm excited to be doing a lot of things, but that's the news that I have for you.
I couldn't be happier for you. It seems like you're in the right place at the right time.
That's certainly how it feels, even though it'll take me a couple of weeks to catch up with what I need, because I've got about 4 courses this semester, but I also wanted to let you know a funny story, and then we'll dive into what we're really here for. So you know that I've been doing this exhibition this week. I thought you'd appreciate this. And for those who are listening to the podcast, this week I'm doing my first exhibition, putting my wildflower photography on exhibition, and poetry and music and stuff like that. You'll appreciate this, Sharon. Yesterday I was in there and I had a classic artist experience. My first viewer of the day was a scrub turkey who walked in from the woods. So I'm sitting there in this little exhibition room.
Yes.
I'm enjoying myself. It's nice and quiet. It's peaceful. And usually people will wander through. And then all of a sudden this turkey shows up, walks through the door, starts walking around, doesn't look at any of the art, which I thought was quite rude. Has nothing kind to say of any of the poetry. Picks up a few little bits of dirt that were on the floor, and then wanders out. And I thought that if there is a picture of an artist's life, it's putting on an exhibition, and the first visitor for the day is a turkey. So I just thought you'd appreciate that.
Of course I do. But that's very funny. But what you just said puts me in mind of something that has to do with our mutual aspiration for this shared podcast. And that is I believe what we're trying to do is rescue philosophy from the philosophers, virtue from the sanctimonious, and art from the critics. And so that we can come home to ourselves so that we can take charge of what we truly value and whom we love. So it's fitting that the turkey would pay you a visit, because the turkey was a would-be critic or a symbol thereof. And when I say the critic, I'm talking about external critics. I'm talking about the critic inside of ourselves. All of those combined forces that we can tug us off the pure integrity of loving, of doing, of trying, of praying, of creating, of designing.
Amen.
For example.
Yeah. I'm so on board with that. You know, the really funny thing to me is I called yesterday when that happened. I called my musical mentor, Paul Cusick. He's a wonderful pianist here on the coast, and he said something very similar. He said, "Well, you know what they say: every turkey is a critic, and every critic is a turkey." So, but
I'm so delighted that
we're on the same page.
He shared that association.
Well, yeah. maybe what I should do is let's have a little bit of, you mentioned what we're doing with our shared podcast. People don't yet know, Sharon. People haven't heard the word. And so I am so on board with everything that you've just said, because it just resonates so deeply with, I guess, the kind of path that I'm trying to walk, in which you have guided me down in many ways. So let me just share with my wonderful podcast listeners who have been listening in for many years or just a few weeks, what it is that we're looking to do here. Because going down the path of the practical Stoic for me was a huge it was of huge benefit to me in many ways, and hopefully to many other people. When I first dived into the practical Stoic, it was out of curiosity and a desire to kind of force myself into learning something about this philosophy that I felt was so deeply resonating with me. And I went through, I think, all of the stages of that you'll find in a new student of philosophy. I went through the ideological stage of I'm a Stoic. And I went through the stage of speaking about something I didn't know anything really about. I went through the stage of, the kind of external view of the world, as opposed to looking within and finding the, like Rilke might say, the solitude that lies within. I've been through these stages. I've taken time away from the podcast. I've gone on adventures. I've gone into the gym industry, and then I've come back and I've done coaching, and then I've stopped, and then I've come back to it. And, it's been a wild ride, but what we're doing here, Sharon, it seems to me like this is a natural progression of the practical Stoic, because there came a point for me where I realized this podcast is not simply about me teaching Stoicism. I think that what people really want to see from me is they want to see somebody actually go on an adventure in life using Stoicism as the springboard into that adventure. And so you'll know this because I've been talking to you for a long time now. I think what Stoicism really taught me was the importance of, the whole doctrine is around living in agreement with nature, which also means your nature. And when I truly understood that idea, that's when everything changed for me. And I said, okay, this podcast is it's not about me sharing Stoicism. It's about me sharing my nature so that people are inspired to do the same in their own unique way. And so in the spirit of what Seneca says when he says, find somebody whose genius is unquestionable and dedicate yourself to an apprenticeship with that thinker so that you completely understand how they think and they can guide you along, and you can get a strong sense of how they live their life. And in the spirit of Zeno, how he spent 10, 20 years with I believe it was Diogenes, these great philosophers, they all take on an apprenticeship with somebody who they admire. And when I looked back at all the people who had inspired me in my own path through the podcast and philosophy, Sharon, from the start, you have been the person who has just been 100% behind me fulfilling whatever is my nature. And so I thought, if I want to take on an apprenticeship, let's do it with Sharon, because she clearly has... of all the people I've spoken to, I'm not making judgments about anyone I've spoken to, because I absolutely love and appreciate everybody. But there was always something about you, Sharon, that I could tell that you have really embodied the philosophy that you have experienced in your life. So with all of that preamble, what we're doing is we're changing the practical Stoic into what I've called the Walled Garden podcast. And we can talk about what that means later. But and Sharon, I'm taking on an apprenticeship with you, and hopefully you will guide me, and we will converse together many, many times about life, philosophy, culture, art, literature, everything good. So anything to add there?
Well, this apprenticeship will be, of course, mutual. I think one thing you and I recognized in each other from the start is that we both recognize that from everyone you can learn something. And that's a nice stance to have in the world, because there's so much wisdom that's, in a sense, right in front of our nose, if we're willing to make our hearts and minds accessible. I guess some people would call that humility. I don't know, open-heartedness. Choose whatever you want from whatever lexicon. But I think the moment that we realize that everything and everybody has a message for us, or multiple messages, would we but listen and then maybe heed. Yes. The heeding part, Yeah. I'm still on training wheels with the heeding part.
Yeah.
So, I've got good days and bad.
We'll have to have a whole episode on how to heed.
Yeah, how to heed. That's a good one. Oh gosh. It's got Dr. Seussian poetic
yes.
possibilities too.
It is to heed that I really need. Will I heed? Will I plead?
I knew you'd run with that.
Yeah, okay. Oh gosh. Okay, I've got to stop. Otherwise, I will keep on going with that, and it'll become annoying. Wonderful. Yeah. Well, I'm so excited about this, Sharon. I think that in general, we are both very in tune with allowing things to travel how they travel, not to put so many expectations on things, but to see where it all takes us. And in that spirit, I hope we will move forward with a sense of adventure on this way, bringing people along with us as well. And I think maybe towards the end of the conversation, we could dive in a little bit about how people can kind of join in on the action and come along on this with us. But I thought maybe for this first episode, I thought it would be really nice, seeing as we haven't done an episode kind of like this before. I'd like to just dive into your life and see if we can get a picture of Sharon, because everybody knows me. They've been following me for many years, or they get to know me via the podcast, but perhaps people don't know about your life and the depth of your experience. And I think to sum up the way that to sum up the reason why I'm excited to dive into your experience, you're full of surprises, Sharon. Like, a few weeks ago, I'm reading Bukowski, and I say, "Have you heard of the poet Bukowski?" And you say casually, "Oh yeah, I went to a poetic school that he went to. I've been around him before." I thought, okay, another mystery unfolds in the life of Sharon. You've got this such depth of experience. And I think there was a moment for me, Sharon, I'll tell you this. There was a moment for me when I thought, this is a person I really need to learn from. And it was when you said, "Words are my stock and trade." And I thought, ooh, that's amazing, to live a life so dedicated to truthful expression and to writing, and that's certainly the direction I'm heading, as you know. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to work with you as well, so that you can guide me in my writing and my thinking. But let's get to know the depths of Sharon. And I know I said that we weren't going to do an interview format, and I'm already falling into those bad habits, but just talk to me. Talk to me about where you grew up. What was the situation?
Well, of course, biography is always selective, especially in this day and age where more and more we're kind of curating our personal images for consumption by the world. I'm going to try to not do that, because I'm just myself and the aggregate of experiences that have left an imprint on me. You said something just a moment ago that, oh gosh. Oh yes, that I said words are my stock and trade. This isn't, say, part of chronological biography, but maybe more a statement of personal developmental biography. I do stand by those words. Words are my stock and trade. And I see the limitation of words. Words are stunningly evocative, and they stunningly fall short as containers or transmitters of value, of beauty, of truth. And so I am a big fan of exploring as many different languages as one can as a mode of explanation, demonstration, provocation, and inspiration. And so what I mean by languages is I mean, French, Japanese, Korean. I mean verbal language, but I also mean music.
Mm.
I mean painting, fill in the blank with your own languages, because I think the more nimble we can move from among different languages, first of all, it deepens our own experience, but it draws us closer to others too, because certain people can receive our messages, whatever they are, in particular languages. Okay, but you asked me about my life. Well, I'm a Californian, or I'm originally from California, though I've lived in different parts of the world. I lived in Greece for a while. I traveled a lot. I went to school in philosophy, religion, and women's studies. I've gone to UC Berkeley. I've gone to Harvard. I've gone to the University of Colorado. A couple other places. And then what Simon referred to a little while ago is a stint that I did at the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics at the Naropa Institute at the in Boulder, Colorado, years ago. Studied with Allen Ginsberg and Gregory Corso and William Burroughs, that whole lot, the so-called beat poets, and then their successors, and the various artists who were kind of satellites around them, and that was formative. I was writing poetry in those days. I still do. And anyway, I ended up for a while when I was quite young working in book publishing, and then realized that I preferred not to be a midwife to other people's ideas, and started writing on my own, and wrote a few books in my own name. And then also to support my family, I did a bunch of ghost writing for celebrities and experts in different fields. I was a with, or sometimes I wasn't mentioned. So that was a very important experience, because while working with celebrity and thought leader type authors, I was exposed, so to say, to their underwear drawer. I mean, I work, when you're writing with and for someone, it's a very close and emotional kind of collaboration, and you really start to learn how people tick. And I learned, I think, pretty early on that it's a pretty risky game to put anyone on a pedestal, that it's valuable to emulate qualities in another person, but how readily we want people to be all good. They're not. They're just not. And we know this, but we still get stung from time to time. So I sort of feel like I'm failing this pop quiz, because I'm not, and then this, I was born on this, and
no, you can't possibly fail. I mean, you're already You're already giving me information that I did not really know about you, and this is good. You know, I mean, just your see, this speaks to one of the reasons why I find you to be kind of one of my ideal preferences for, or my ideal preference for, you know, a mentor, is because the way that you speak shows the breadth of experience that you have. Because I, you know, just from talking to you in the past, I would have guessed that you had studied many, many things, experienced many different types of people, experienced many different types of philosophies, many different types of languages, expressions of language, you know, and I think that what that does to people, well, certainly what I've experienced in you is, like you said to me a long time ago, let's remove the ism, you know, let's not be the stoicism or the the stoic, or let's not be the this or the that or the this or the that. There's just too much good stuff out there to put walls around what it is that you are or who it is that you are. And I think that that's what I'm so excited to get out of you, Sharon, is just that constant guiding guiding away from, as you said, you know, at the start, the kind of people who would bring you into their little niche, and to, you know, towards something that is truly truly me, you know, and that will happen for anybody who listens as well. Okay, so you've done all this study at these amazing universities, you've written poetry, you've written books, you've, you know, ghostwritten for the written for these celebrities. What did you like? I know I'm going into the interview format as well, but that's fine because I want to know this. Writing with the celebrities there, what did that teach you about yourself?
To value my own mind. Not that I disvalued it before, but I fiercely believe we have to think for ourselves and to check ourselves to make sure we're really doing that. It's hard to do it now. You know, for a lot of reasons we could spend a whole podcast talking about, you know, social media, etc. But I think it's crucial because to think for ourselves, because and I don't mean to sound oppositional. You know, that doesn't mean like the important thing is that I don't think like you. I don't want to catch your thought. I don't mean it like that, but I think that life is changed by, and hopefully bettered by, individuals who start something. And life is also poisoned, of course, by individuals who put great stock into their ideas, but their ideas turn out to be pernicious, right? But if you're, for lack of a better way of saying it, if you're in the virtue lane, if you're on the side of humanity, then we can all, as individuals, really be, you know, as Gandhi said, you know, be the change. Our decisions can be very important pivot points that can and the ensuing actions that result from those decisional pivot points can and will radiate into the future, ramify, and can have great effect. So.
Yeah. Well,
Am I allowed to extol your virtues?
Of course, but I have to say one thing before you do.
Okay.
To the extent that there are any virtues in me. But, I really like what you say about just ideas can go down a really good path, or they can really end up ruining things. A Bukowski line comes to mind. He says, "Beware the preachers, beware the readers of books." and I'm like, when I read him, I said, it's exactly right. It's exactly right. And I recognize that within myself as well. Beware the person who says you need to be a Stoic, like because of this, and this.
Yes.
And so, you've been kind of in the background watching me as I wrote my book last year, which people will be glad to know it is paid for. It's in print. Even though yesterday the printers emailed me and said, "Hey, by the way, every document you've sent us is wrong in almost every way, so I'll be fixing that today." But it's out there and it's ready to get going. And I'm so excited about that. And one thing that I've recognized when I started writing my poetry, when I started writing this book, you were very encouraging of me and saying, just whatever it is that's in there, just let it out and it'll come to fruition. And it certainly has, and it will in time. But what I recognized when I started writing those things was, I thought there's something much deeper than my own understanding happening here. There's something bubbling up to the surface from within me that it would be good to have a guide, as I go on this path of trying, to the extent that I'm trying to do this, to express my ideas. But even when I say my ideas, Sharon, and people will know when they read the book that it's a strange concoction of thoughts that are in there. But what I'm ultimately trying to say is, I want to have a guide, somebody who recognizes the potential benefits and risks of putting ideas out into the world and of exploring certain directions. And so I think that you will be certainly a rod next to this tree holding me straight in the winds of life, is how I would put it. So
that's lovely. One of the things that impresses me about you, Simon, is you are always exposing yourself to the dangers and risks and rewards of expressing yourself in different languages. You're always doing stuff. You're always creating.
That is not a virtue, Sharon. You know that.
Well, stay with me here.
Okay, I will.
I'm put in mind of. I'm disappointed that I can't call up this person's name, but there was a child. I believe he was 10 years old, and I think his first name was Nicholas. I wish I could say for sure. And during the time when AIDS was sweeping the world like a wildfire, he was, at the time, I believe this was in the early 90s, the oldest living person who had been born with AIDS. It had come through his mother. And he knew this 10-year-old kid, and he knew his days were numbered. But he said what he believed, 18 words. He said, do as much as you can in the time that you have where you are. And it seems like that's what you're doing. Or whether you are or you aren't, that's what I would exhort anyone to do with their life. And when that beautiful child said, do as much as you can, I don't think that needs to be taken as a frantic, kind of horizontal modeled idea of do as much as you can, but instead do as much as you can vertically, going deep. Because if you go deep into anything, if you really care to that point where it's dangerous, right?
Mm.
This could be about a person. This could be a form of self-expression. This could be a scientific invention that you're working on. But when we dive in wholeheartedly, I think that depth caretakes and safeguards breadth of effort. Anyway, do as much as you can with the time that you have, wherever you are. Yeah.
That what you just said there about depth, caretaking, breadth. I probably used the wrong word there, but it's, yeah, so much of what you're saying there is just really resonating with the kind of path that I'm trying to go on. I've had this little motto, you might say, in my mind for quite some time, which I'm sure I'll slap on a mug soon. But it's basically aim higher, dig deeper, and that seems to be
lovely
for me. Whenever I think about that, I think that's exactly what I'm trying to do with my clients, and you talk about whether it's scientific inventions, whether it's pursuing a career, whether it's just pursuing gentleness in a relationship or something like that. It's always about I've watched, well, let me share this with you. In the past few weeks, and I mentioned this to a new client this morning, I've been realizing that while I've been coaching people, it was me who was the fool all along, and it was me who was being coached, and I'm constantly being reminded of that when I see that every single one of my clients has something about them that is superior to my way of being, something about them that is beautiful and inspiring, and I watch people go on these journeys, some of them over multiple years now. I've seen them go through the depths, like the real hard times, and then also the heights when they come to certain benefits that they've been seeking. And it always has to do with what's your aim, what are you really moving towards, and what do you truly believe would be good for you, the highest possible good. And then what's the what is it in the depths, that you're not seeing that could help you to allow that to flourish. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because obviously, as the stuff that I'm writing, a lot of it has that kind of imagery of the tree,
yes.
And when you think about the tree, it's something, the tree is not sustained by the roots below, and it's not sustained by the branches above. It's sustained by the mutual interaction of those two things. It's always the heights and the depths.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I mean, this is kind of what we're planning here, right? Is to go through those heights and depths, and to help people to dig a little bit deeper, and to aim a little bit higher. And hopefully along the way, we will all come to some sort of better understanding of who we truly are, and what it is that would that would really be beneficial for us and the world. As you said, sit in your seat in the theater of life. And I'm going to chuck one more scattered thought in there. Perhaps speaking to people about why it is that I've decided to do a Master of Divinity, and why I'm so excited to have you along with me on that path. And you've already suggested Jewish documents that I should dive into, and I can't wait to do that. So I've shared this on the podcast before, and I always thought it was funny. This was really a pivotal moment for me when I had this Facebook group, and it's still there, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to be completely honest there, because I don't spend any time on Facebook anymore, and I feel bad that it's kind of still just meandering about there. But somebody joined the group, and they have inspired me more than they know. But there's a question when they join the group of, why are you here? And they said, well, I'm excited to learn more about a godless philosophy, something like that. Yes. And I thought to myself, Epictetus talks about God, Seneca talks about God, Marcus Aurelius talks about God. All these philosophers are trying to answer the most fundamental question of existence. And now you've paused there, Sharon. I'm not sure if you're still with me.
There you are. Somehow we lost each other.
Awesome. Well, look, we'll dive back in anyway. It's fine.
Please.
Let me finish my long winding thought. All I was getting at is that there's this passage that Seneca writes in the first letter of his Natural Questions. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but essentially what he says in this letter is that if he had not started questioning whatever God is, or the highest possible being, or the highest possible thing that we are a part of, and if he had not started unveiling the mysteries of the universe by that way, his life would not have been worth living. This is Seneca, the Stoic philosopher.
Yes.
His life would not have been worth living if he didn't start questioning the mysteries of the universe. And, you've been watching me as I've kind of developed a deeper relationship with my musical sense last year, with my writing, with all kinds of things that I'm getting involved in, and stepping back and watching the world and looking at the clues as they happen and thinking, this is a very mysterious thing that's happening here. And I'm interested in taking my philosophical quest to the highest possible level, not stopping at the personal development world, but saying, well, no, people have wrestled with questions of God and divinity and intuition and revelation and prophecy and all these things. They've been wrestling with them for as long as we've been humanity. And I find myself being drawn in that direction to ask those kinds of questions. And I understand that Master of Divinity, it will be giving me a more fundamental Christian education, but nonetheless, I'm excited to get that, because I've realized that through my writings, that Christian background is just bubbling up. It's like it's yes. All there. It's in the depths, and there's more to be discovered. But I'm interested with you, Sharon, in as you said at the start, to speak to your finding the value of different languages. I want to be talking to you about poetry and music and religious texts, and asking the fundamental questions. And in that way, to quote Kai Whiting, actually, the other day he gave me some of the best advice ever, because I was asking him, I was like, should I keep the practical Stoic and the walled garden? Should we do it separately? And he said, no, like, Simon, the walled garden, he said, it's a natural progression. And what he said is, if you just keep the practical Stoic as it is, because you're afraid that people will stop listening if you change it to something else, that's the wrong reason to do it. And he said, you'll be treating the practical Stoic like a baby when it's actually in its toddler phase. And that made a lot of sense to me. The practical Stoic is evolving, and the reason it's going to be called the walled garden is because of the imagery of the walled garden in mythology. As you know, it's this perfect balance between nature and culture. This perfect harmony, and that's what I'm seeking. So I don't know, Sharon, I'm excited to ask all these questions with you. I just can't wait.
Oh, me too. It's questions.
Yeah.
Nothing's better than questions.
Nothing's better. Yeah, nothing's better. Well, look, why don't we just have a quick conversation about how people can kind of get involved, and maybe a few of our secret long-term plans as well, in terms of our writing together and things like that. So what we're going to be doing for everybody who's listening is we're going to be kind of setting this up, and we want to have a good community on Patreon. We're going to stick in my Patreon at the moment, and invite people to come along on the path with us. We're not going to be changing the name of the podcast quite yet. We're going to be doing conversations every week. And I think, Sharon, talk to me about this. I think we can guarantee people 2 episodes a month, but there may be times where I will steal you away for my own benefit and say, let's just have a conversation about my writing today, or get some feedback and guidance from you. So definitely like 2 episodes a month, sometimes 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. And we'll be diving into all sorts of questions and topics, but most likely just having these conversations where we bring things that are inspiring us, things that are calling us forward. And on that note, I think it would be good if we allow people to ask questions as well, if they want to send questions in, if they're
definitely
in that particular tier within the Patreon. Yeah. Wonderful. And on that note as well, I'm going to spring something upon you now. Perhaps what we should do is, I threw an idea out to you. I said, Sharon, maybe it would be really fun. Well, no, not maybe. It would be really fun to write a book together. The idea that I had was kind of in the style of Seneca's epistles, writing moral letters. Letters from 2 Stoics, even though we would not. That was my cheesy, if we want to get a book deal sort of name, but perhaps not that. But this is not to say that this is definitely happening. This is a moment, and perhaps what we could do is say, once we get to 100 patrons in Patreon, we're at 58 at the moment, but once we get to 100. That's when we'll start saying, okay, people want us to write a book together. Let's dive in. And we want to take people on that journey by releasing the letters as we go to our Patreon community. What do you think about that?
I like that a lot. Yes.
Yeah, excellent. So everybody who's listening, consider it a goal. If you want to support us, jump on the Patreon. There's a whole bunch of levels that you can go to on there for certain support and the benefits you'll get. And I'll still be doing the Seneca episodes. I'll still be doing everything that I'm doing on there now, plus Sharon, which will be wonderful. Apart from that, now we didn't even dive that deep into your life, Sharon. Would you like to continue this conversation over time, or is there? I'm wondering, do you have a few more moments in this conversation to dive a little bit deeper?
A couple of moments.
Okay.
I suppose one thing that I conspicuously left out, unintentionally though, is I'm most known in the world for writing a popular interpretation of the Stoic Epictetus. And I did this. The book it's maybe been in print now 28 years, 27, 28 years. And I wrote the book before anyone except for academics cared about Stoicism and Epictetus in particular. So that's writing that book was a big part of my life journey, because I realized that I'm called to make otherwise abstruse and hard to get at ideas accessible to regular people, which I guess is just another way of saying a popularizer. But I mean that I like to think of the idea of being a popularizer in a noble sense, because there is so much wisdom that can be locked in dusty books. And I just believe it's important to liberate wisdom so that it can act as an invitation for people to go deeper in their lives and in their explorations.
Yeah. And if I can just speak to that and your work, I mean, people have heard me multiple times on the podcast saying, if you want to start anywhere with Stoicism, a great place to start is with a guide to the good life. It's such a great collection of just beautiful. You've done such a great job with Epictetus's writings. And I always tell people, this is where you want to start, because you can turn to any page and you've immediately got something just stunning to think about, And so I can't recommend it highly enough. Everybody has to, if you're going to follow the journey with Sharon, please also grab that as well. And this is perhaps a good segue into talking about how, Sharon, I'm a salesperson, and I'm a good salesperson, right? I'm going to admit that from the start. I've done a lot of sales work. That has been my job for much of my life, or my 20s. But as I've gone through Stoicism and stuff like that, I've tried to pull back and not be that person. But I do want to express to people that, what we're doing here, we're very excited about this, and we want it to go well, and we do want to bring people along on this path. And so what I would express to people is that we're not going to be the kinds of people who every episode say, come on, get along on our Patreon and come and support us and do this and do that. But if people want to come along on this path, what I can guarantee, and I think you'll share this, is that they will find two true seekers. We are honestly seeking. We are honestly going on a path together, trying to figure out some answers to deep questions. And if people want to come along, then we would love to have them there. And we'd love to take them along on this road.
Hop on the wagon.
Here we come. Yeah, wonderful. Well, cool. I'm gonna stop recording now, but thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you,
and we're excited to take you along on this. As I said, the podcast will not be changed until I think I'm gonna change it on the week that I release the book. That'll be a good
idea. Yeah.
But until then, it'll be a few months. We're going to be hanging out on Patreon. You'll only be able to get our episodes. We're going to create a bit of a backlog there. So come along if you wish, and we do hope to see you there. And as we said, once we get to 100 Patreon followers or members, we would love to start writing those epistles together, so that I can take on yet another interesting thing to add to my basket and yours. So
yes.
Thank you, Sharon.
Oh, thank you, Simon. Always a joy.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode with myself and Sharon Lebell. I hope you're as excited as we are for these updates coming to the Practical Stoic podcast. And if you want to follow along, we would love to see you in our Patreon community. It's still Simon J.E. Drew. Sorry, that the link is patreon.com/Simon J.E. Drew. And there you can join up as a Courage member. And as you do that, you will get access to all of the episodes that we record in the coming weeks that will only be available on Patreon for the moment. And as we said, we would love to get to 100 patrons in our community. And if we can get to that, then we are going to be very excited to start writing our epistles every month and start getting onto that project and hopefully release a book in the future of our own moral letters, you might say. So this is something that I'm very excited to work with Sharon on, and we would love to see you in our community. So jump over there, patreon.com/Simon J.E. Drew. We've got many different topics that we're going to be covering over the coming weeks. And on top of these conversations, you'll also get access to now a backlog of, I think, upwards of 60 or 70 Seneca series episodes that are all there waiting for you to have a listen to. So again, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey there, YouTubers. I just wanted to let you know that if you love this episode and you'd like many more just like it, then you can head to patreon.com/Simon J.E. Drew. There you'll get access to exclusive episodes that haven't been released yet, as well as many other benefits. Also, if you'd like to work one-on-one with me in my coaching practice, then you can head to simonjedrew.com/coaching. Talk to you soon.